Good morning. Good morning. It is Tuesday, April 15th, and you all know what that means. Today is tax day. Is anybody celebrating? Not so much. And this is exactly the day that Trump hopefully should be focused on telling the American people what he is going to do to reduce the tax burden for the average tax filer, because we have all just gone through tax season. And for the average person, it's either a ton of work doing their own individual taxes, or they have to pay someone, sometimes a lot of money, to help them file. And so what really can be done and what steps should be taken to lighten the tax filing burden on hardworking Americans? Well, Pete Sepp, who is the president of the National Taxpayers Union, joins us now this morning to discuss. So good morning, Pete. And can I say happy tax day? I don't even think that's really like a thing. That seems very counterintuitive. But nonetheless, happy tax day.
Well, thank you. President Trump spoke of Liberation Day when he levied tariffs on a number of countries. Maybe this is really Liberation Day, because you end up filing your taxes. Some people have started way earlier, but this is the day it's due. Unfortunately, you go through, as a taxpayer, tax filing day every day, even if you don't know it. The record-keeping burdens, the strategizing you might do with your financial planner, the consequences you might think of when you buy a house, sell a house, when you take a different job, even when you have a family. Taxes factor into it. And so they're with us year-round.
Yeah, that is a really good point, especially for people who are who run their own businesses or independent contractors and so forth. Like, I wasn't aware until I was an independent contractor for a while, as far as some of those deadlines that you actually have to, it's not just a once a year filing. It's like a once a month, or at minimum once a quarter, in terms of actually sending money to the IRS. And then, will you get it back if you overgave it to them? Maybe not. I mean, it's such a racket, honestly, in so many ways, that it's so complex that the average person, even the average tax professional, finds it, very difficult to navigate. And yet it seems like Congress really hasn't cared about this as much, because they want to generate revenue so that they can go and spend on all kinds of things that aren't actually helping the American people. So realistically, though, when President Trump is looking at lightening the tax burden for Americans, what does that actually mean tangibly?
Yes, there really are the long game and the short game when it comes to this whole question. The short game is making sure we prevent a $4 trillion plus tax increase. That will happen unless we extend the 2017 tax cut law that President Trump signed way back then. Now, if we want to talk about the long game, then we're thinking about, well, do we transition this whole system to something like a flat rate income tax, or replace it with a national retail sales tax? Those questions are going to have to wait for the more urgent matter, which is making sure that those 2017 provisions are extended. I'm talking about the child tax credit. That was $2,000 under the 2017 law. It will revert back to just $1,000 if we don't extend it. There were across the board tax rate reductions. Those will expire, and suddenly families will find themselves in a 25% bracket when they were in a 15 or a 20% bracket. That can't happen. That's going to be a huge tax increase. Bottom line, a typical middle-class family could face a tax increase of between $2,000 and $3,000 unless we act on this tax relief and make sure it's extended before this year is out.
Wow. And I'm talking with Pete Sepp, the president of the National Taxpayers Union. And I think a lot of listeners aren't really aware of this. I mean, we talk about a lot of other things in the mainstream media and the news cycle and all of this, but aren't really aware about how this might affect them if this isn't passed. Is this something, to your knowledge, that Congress is even contemplating? I mean, they are set to pass this big spending bill this week, but it seems like they're more focused on spending than actually helping relieve the burden for American taxpayers.
Fortunately, there is some good news. The budget resolution that Congress has been working on, both the House and the Senate, have different approaches to it, but both are saying our budget resolution, our framework, is going to have to include extension of the 2017 taxpayer relief law. So great. Very glad that's moving forward. The thing is, Congress has a habit of bickering over small details and not getting the job done until the very last minute. That would be economically a terrible thing to do right now. There's a lot of uncertainty out there among small and large businesses, among families who are trying to figure out, well, how do we plan our finances and make sure we're taken care of in the year ahead? There's a lot of anxiety over inflation still. There's anxiety over interest rates. Some of that anxiety can be taken away if Congress and the president work together to extend these taxpayer relief provisions and say, look, whatever else is coming down the road, you don't have to worry about a way, way bigger tax bill.
Yes, absolutely. And I think some of those immediate reliefs would be very welcome. And, you mentioned as well that some of the longer term things that might need to be the long game instead of some of these key provisions of the 2017 tax cuts that could be more immediate. We do need to focus on, though, especially over the next 4 years and hopefully accomplishing some of that. But realistically, when you look at the special interests in Washington, you look at how Congress, even on the Republican side, I think this is a uniparty problem that they want to overspend. And so DOJ is making a lot of suggestions, but are we really going to get a lot of cuts? Maybe. But when we're looking at kind of that longer term, is it even realistic, and how would that be accomplished to implement something like a flat tax or even a national sales tax instead of this very mired, complicated income tax? It just seems like that would be such a difficult shift, but maybe it's a little less complicated than somebody like me who isn't a tax professional would think.
Yeah, it's true that the biggest problems with our tax system happened in one fell swoop. The income tax was enacted through the 16th Amendment to the Constitution early in the 20th century. Now, other problems, though, have just been creeping up on us incrementally. Our most recent study of tax complexity shows Americans spent a total of 7.1 billion hours and $465 billion just to comply with the federal tax system. Those burdens didn't happen overnight. Just year after year, the gradual passing of laws and rulemakings, deductions, credits, clawbacks added to the tax system has created that complexity. We need to undo it incrementally, and we have a number of recommendations in our study, starting with what we call a quadrennial simplification process. Every 4 years, private and public sector volunteers sit down, go through the tax code line by line, and start striking provisions that no longer make sense, that conflict with each other, that are economically unproductive. Have Congress vote to get those out all in one block under a privileged resolution. We'll start making progress towards simplification, and in doing so, we'll get to a flatter tax system, or maybe one where we can just ditch the whole thing and look at a retail sales tax. States are doing that now. They've used that method, and the federal government can too.
Yeah, absolutely. And the federal government certainly can be more modernized and more efficient. And I think that's one of the points that the Trump administration is underscoring for Americans by having this level of transparency through DOJ. But in terms of, not just the IRS, but certainly the IRS needs to kind of come into, the new century and into 2025 because the IRS, but also other federal agencies, like listeners are very well aware, because I ranted about this a while ago, that when I was contacting the Department of Education regarding, I still have outstanding student loans from law school, like a lot of, unfortunately, adults do even decades after graduating. They had no ability to email me anything, and I had to literally go and pay $7 to send them a fax, because I haven't faxed anything since like the 1990s. And
Yes.
They had no ability to provide any sort of customer service. But I think this is the problem. The government doesn't see me as a customer. They see me maybe as a constituent, but really more as just a number and someone who is required to comply, almost like a probationary sort of status, that you would think of in terms of government viewpoint. And that mentality really should change.
Yeah, it should. And the government's attitude in so many cases is, we can't do that. You're crazy. Go away. You bother us. Oh, but don't forget to write your check before you leave. And we can't allow that anymore, especially at a place like the IRS. We have demanded that whoever is in charge at the IRS, Republican or Democratic commissioner, doesn't matter, but there needs to be a detailed plan for modernizing this agency, a punch list to achieve that plan, and an oversight body to make sure that the IRS is staying on track. I mean, when we learned just last week that when DOJ went to the IRS and said, the login button for the IRS's website really should be in the upper right-hand corner, the way most people expect it to be, rather than at the bottom in the middle, they were told, well, we can do that, but it'll take us until July. DOJ showed them how they could do that in about half a day. Those are the kinds of frustrating technological roadblocks in government that people are tired of seeing time after time. No more excuses. It can be done.
Yes, and it seems very simplistic. But again, if this were a company that was for profit, that needed to generate its own revenue, not just take from the American people, they would have to modernize, because they would want customers, they would want it to be accessible and consumer friendly, but they just really don't have any incentives. And so in just the last minute or so I have with you, Pete Sepp, and I appreciate your time on this because I find it fascinating, and hopefully listeners who feel the pain of the IRS understand why we're talking about it this morning. What practical steps, who is actually doing this in terms of looking at all these things instead of just saying, well, this is what should happen? Who in DC is actually trying to accomplish this?
Well, certainly National Taxpayers Union, the group I lead, has a detailed roadmap for the IRS to modernize, to have better customer service, to respect taxpayer rights, to set up appeals and judicial processes that allow taxpayers to be heard. When working with the National Taxpayer Advocate's Office, that's an IRS office, and other oversight bodies, along with Congress, we can achieve this. There's bipartisan legislation in Congress to help clean things up at the IRS. We're all going to get together and try and do it this year. We can't afford to wait another year.
Absolutely. And so where is that legislation in Congress? Where is it at this stage?
It's called the Taxpayer Assistance and Service Act. It has been drafted in the Senate Finance Committee, and we hope to see it reported to the floor shortly.
Excellent. Well, we will keep our eye on that and have you back on, Pete Sepp, to discuss. Really appreciate your time this morning, Pete Sepp, president of the National Taxpayers Union, and you can follow them on X at NTU for National Taxpayers Union. And that's enough about